lose money, not when people leave. The real moment is when you let people stay and quietly start disappearing yourself. You don't notice it at first. You call it loyalty. You call it being understanding. You call it being human. But slowly, your edge dulls, your standards soften, your hunger quiets down, and one day, you wake up weaker than the person you used to be. Not because life attacked you, but because you kept the wrong doors open. This video isn't about loneliness. It's about leakage. Because strength doesn't vanish overnight. It leaks out. Conversation by conversation, compromise by compromise, person by person. The more people you let in, the more access they get. And access always has a cost. Most people never connect the dots. They think they're tired. They think they've lost motivation. They think something is wrong with their mindset. No. What's wrong is who has access to you, Tara. Your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, your attention. You gave it away freely, repeatedly, without conditions. And now you feel slower, less focused, less dangerous. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody likes to say out loud. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. And not everyone who stays deserves mercy. Some people don't stab you in the back. They sit next to you and drain you quietly. They talk too much. They need too much. They expect too much. They normalize weakness. And the worst part? They feel harmless. They're not enemies. They're familiar. And familiar people are the most expensive. Because you hesitate to cut them off. You explain yourself. You give chances. You delay the decision. And while you delay, your edge keeps fading. Look around. Most people who never become anything impressive aren't lacking talent or discipline. They're surrounded. Surrounded by noise. Surrounded by opinions. Surrounded by emotional debt. They're never alone long enough to hear their own instincts again. That's why ruthless people look calm. Not angry. Not loud. Calm. Because silence returns clarity. Distance restores power. At some point, you realize something brutal. Every person in your life either sharpens you or dulls you. There is no neutral. If being around someone makes you explain yourself more, justify your goals, lower your standards, or tolerate what you know is beneath you, that connection is costing you, and the cost compounds. You become slower to decide. You hesitate where you used to move. You negotiate with yourself. That's weakness. And weakness doesn't come from struggle. It comes from overexposure. This is why the strongest versions of people usually appear after isolation. Not because isolation is magical, but because access was removed. No commentary. No emotional clutter. No outside influence. Just focus, pressure, and direction. Cutting people off isn't cruelty. It's conservation. You don't owe access to anyone who makes you less effective. And the moment you accept that, your energy starts coming back. Your thoughts sharpen. Your tolerance drops. Your standards rise. This is where the separation begins. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, final. Most people don't keep weak connections because they're kind. They keep them because they're afraid of friction. They're afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being called cold, afraid of being alone with their own thoughts. So they tolerate what they shouldn't. Here's the truth most won't admit. Weak connections survive because they feel comfortable, not because they're good. Comfort is the enemy. Comfort makes you delay hard conversations. Comfort makes you ignore signals. Comfort makes you accept patterns you already know are wrong. And over time, comfort reshapes you. Not in one big moment, in micro adjustments. You stop pushing as hard. You stop speaking directly. You stop demanding excellence from yourself and others. Why? Because the people around you can't keep up. So you slow down. That's how identity erosion starts. Not through failure, through accommodation. You adjust your tone. You soften your goals. You filter your thoughts. Soon you're no longer operating at your natural frequency. You're sinking to theirs. And here's the dangerous part. Humans adapt faster to weakness than to strength. If your environment is undisciplined, your discipline feels extreme. If your environment is unfocused, your intensity feels too much. If your environment is mediocre, your ambition feels unrealistic. So you compress yourself. To avoid resistance, that compression costs you momentum. And momentum is fragile. Once it's broken, rebuilding takes violence, not motivation. Another uncomfortable truth. Most people around you don't want you to fail. They just don't want you to outgrow them. So they joke. They distract. They normalize delay. They don't sabotage you openly. They soften you subtly. That's worse, because you don't feel attacked. You feel relaxed. And relaxed people don't transform. They stagnate. Look at patterns, not intentions. Someone can care about you and still be destructive to your future. Someone can love you and still pull you backward. Access doesn't require bad intentions, only misalignment. And misalignment drains power. Every conversation has a cost. Every interaction leaves residue. Either it sharpens your focus or it fogs it. There is no in-between. This is why ruthless people audit their circle. Not emotionally, strategically. They ask silent questions. Do I leave this interaction clearer or heavier? Do I feel more precise or more scattered? Do I feel pushed forward or pulled sideways? If the answer keeps coming back negative, the decision is already made. Most people ignore these signals because cutting off feels aggressive. But what they don't realize is this. Every day you delay, you're choosing comfort over growth. You're choosing familiarity over evolution. And evolution is never comfortable. That's why growth phases feel lonely. You're shedding skins. And skins don't come off clean. There's friction. There's silence. There's distance. But on the other side of that distance, clarity returns. Weak connections don't just drain energy. They rewrite your baseline. Not suddenly, gradually. You don't notice the shift because it feels reasonable. You stop waking up as early. You justify it. You stop training as hard. You rationalize it. You delay decisions you once made instantly. You explain it away. Nothing looks wrong individually, but stacked together, you become slower. Here's what's really happening. Your standards are being negotiated daily, not by enemies, by proximity. Humans unconsciously mirror the environment they spend the most time in. You don't rise to your potential. You settle to your surroundings. That's why ambition dies quietly. You start tolerating. Late starts, missed commitments, excuses disguised as balance, half effort labeled as progress. And once tolerance increases, discipline collapses. Because discipline requires intolerance. Strong people are not harsh. They're precise. They don't accept what weakens them, internally or externally. But weak connections blur that precision. They normalize delay. They stretch timelines. They soften consequences. Soon you don't feel urgency anymore. And urgency is dangerous to lose. Urgency creates momentum. Momentum creates identity. Without it, you drift. Another truth most people hate hearing. Your environment trains your nervous system. If the people around you are reactive, you become reactive. If they avoid pressure, you start avoiding pressure. If they talk more than they act, you start talking. And talking feels productive. Until years pass with nothing built. This is why cutting people off feels violent. You're not just removing them. You're removing a version of yourself. Not the version that adapted. The version that compromised. The version that learned to tolerate less than it was capable of. That version will fight to survive. It will whisper, "You're being extreme. You're overthinking. You don't need to isolate." That voice isn't wisdom. It's conditioning. And conditioning resists change. Most people never break free because they confuse familiarity with safety. But familiarity doesn't protect you. It traps you. Growth requires environments that demand more from you than you're comfortable giving. Anything else is maintenance. And maintenance slowly becomes decay. Here's the cold reality. If someone is allowed consistent access to you, they shape you. Through tone, through pace, through expectations. That's why selective isolation is not weakness. It's control. You don't isolate because you hate people. You isolate because you respect your future. Strong people understand something early. You can't build something rare while surrounded by common behavior. And you definitely can't become dangerous while constantly explaining yourself to people who don't operate at your level. There's a specific moment when cutting people off becomes unavoidable. Not when they betray you. Not when they insult you. Not when things explode. The real moment is quieter. It's when you start editing yourself around them. When you pause before speaking. When you dilute your goals mid-sentence. When you stop sharing plans because you already know the reaction. The hesitation is the signal, because hesitation means misalignment. And misalignment always turns into drag. Here's what weak people get wrong. They think cutting people off requires a fight. It doesn't. The most effective cuts are silent. No speeches, no closure conversations, no emotional exits, just distance, access reduced, availability limited, energy withdrawn, because explanations create negotiations, and negotiations reopen doors that should stay shut. You don't need permission to protect your momentum. You don't need validation to change a direction. You don't owe consistency to people who benefit from you staying the same. This is where most people fail. They announce their growth. They justify their absence. They try to be understood. That's weakness disguised as maturity. Strong people move first. Then let results explain everything. When you cut people off correctly,